Ghost fish, the tide that wouldn't go back. I arrived at the pier just before dusk, when the water turned to hammered pewter and the horizon diluted into fog. The sign above the boathouse hung crooked, Blakely Marine Research, its letters blistered by salt. No one stood at the office window, though I'd been told someone would meet me with a key. The wind pushed the door open a few inches, and then it swung wider, as though a very patient hand had been holding it for me all along. Inside, it smelled like old rope and iodine, and something metallic, as if a coin had dissolved into the air. My footsteps echoed down a short hall lined with clipboards and embossed photographs, gray-bearded men with squinting eyes holding fish too big to be real. In the last photo, the man didn't smile. He held a lamp instead of a fish, and the water behind him was black, the kind of black that eats shapes. "Hello?" My voice landed in the silence and went flat. Somewhere deeper in the building, something ticked. I followed the sound past a door labeled Lab, another labeled Freezer, and into a narrow room where a single incandescent bulb burned over a desk. On the desk sat a ring of keys and a handwritten note. "Welcome, Mara. Whaler's Rest cabin is yours for the season. Generators full, fuel out back. Work nights if you can. The run happens after dark. Don't bring a net. Don't throw anything back." The lowercase d hooked like a fishing lure. I pocketed the keys and stepped back outside, where the fog had risen and the tide had crept closer to the pilings like a dog nosing at your knees. The world smelled like seaweed, creosote, and rain-bent fire. I pulled my hood up and made for the path. Whaler's Rest sat half a kilometer along the coast, a leftover shack from when people still boiled whales in iron pots. It hunkered into the headland, shingles like scales, windows blind with salt. Inside I found a bed, a table, a two-burner stove, and the generator's choked breath waiting to be yanked awake. I tried the light switch anyway. The bulb flickered once, and then steadied in a jaundiced glow. I should have unpacked. I should have boiled water for tea and checked the seals around the windows. Instead, I found myself standing at the window, staring down at the narrow cove. The water moved like something breathing under a blanket. The last smudge of sun retreated, and a sound reached me, a thin, crystalline note like fingernails tapped against glass. Then again, a little closer. I would have said it was the rigging on a sailboat, except there were no sailboats. I'd come to catalog nocturnal fish, to track a rumored migration through the local trench, lanternfish, oarfish, the occasional deep drifter. Ghost fish, the internet called them. Things with bones you could see through and organs that swallowed light. I had not come to be stared at. Yet that is how it felt. When I finally forced myself to turn from the window, I did it slowly, as though someone watched me from the black outside. The cabin's floor slanted slightly to the sea. The kettle, when I set it on the burner, drifted an inch. I caught it with a palm and lit the stove. The first escalation came small enough to be dismissed. The kettle sang and quieted, and when I poured the water, it came out strangely cold, as if it had boiled elsewhere, some parallel kitchen. Steam still lifted in thin strings. I cupped the mug, and it warmed my hands even while the tea tasted like rain caught in old gutters. I drank anyway and told myself the taste would improve. Wind walked its fingers along the shingles. The generator coughed to a lower pitch. Across the room my duffel bag shifted, just a slouch, the way something would move if the cabin itself exhaled. I shut the window latch and told myself to stop being 5 years old. At full dark, the ocean lit up. Not all at once. It started as a faint pulse beyond the cove's mouth, a bruised glow that flinched with the waves. Then more pulses, like a heartbeat learning to be many hearts. Bioluminescent algal blooms, I thought, and stepped closer to the glass. But the light coalesced into shapes, spindled filaments, fins that were not exactly fins, eyes that were not exactly eyes. Under the water's skin they turned and turned, schooling with a precision that felt choreographed. Not a scattering, but a procession. I grabbed my jacket, flashlight, field notebook, and the little hand net I'd thrown in just in case. The moment the cabin door opened, the cold came in like a guest of honor, and the night smell changed. Less creosote now, more brine, and something faintly sweet like cut melon left in the sun. The path down to the cove was slick with blown kelp. I slid more than walked. When the surf foam licked my boots, the phosphorescence brightened in greeting. No, that was silly, and the shapes turned toward me. I thought of the note's last lines. Don't bring a net. Don't throw anything back. I lifted the net anyway, a reflex from a childhood of tide pools. Just to look, I murmured, as if the sea required justification. A wave rose and poured itself over my ankles, and there they were. Small, pale fish with long streaming fins, not fins ribbons, like spun glass. They moved in slow, synchronized jerks, as if controlled by a careful puppeteer. Their bodies gave off light, but not an ordinary, even glow. They were lit from within by something not entirely light, like the suggestion of light, pale smears shaped into fish. Their eyes, if eyes they were, looked like tiny corridors in a house much larger than they were. I dipped the net. The fish creatures didn't scatter. One floated in, then another, like guests who'd been waiting for the door to open. The net felt impossibly heavy, though it held almost nothing. As I lifted it, a long ribbon fin brushed my wrist. Cold traveled up my arm like a wick. Okay, I said aloud, as if soothing a skittish dog. I brought the net close to my headlamp. The fish turned slow circles inside, observing me, and something moved behind their eyes. Not a reflection of my lamp, not the glint of water. A flicker like a memory learning to stand. Don't bring a net, the note had said. I lowered mine into the sea. The fish drifted out easily, as if the net's threads had not been barriers but suggestions, and they chose to ignore them. I should have climbed back up to the cabin, locked the door with both keys, and called D. Should have slept in the rattling light and let morning burn the weirdness to vapor. Instead, I waded deeper until the water tugged at my thighs. When the wave drew back, the sand under my feet felt soft and alive, as though whatever made those fish glow had sunk into the shore. Something brushed past my leg. I flinched, sloshed, laughed once, and told myself it was kelp. Then another touch, higher up, cool and delicate as someone's long hair dragged across my skin. Again, that wick of cold, running up to the base of my skull. The fish had gathered around me, a ring of frosted glass, turning not as a school, but as a single mind in many parts. They weren't curious. They were counting. And then I heard it, not the tapping on glass sound from earlier, but something like a choir learning how to hum without mouths. The pitch raised the hairs along my arms, and the fog pressed closer, a felted ceiling that lowered with the sound. In the humming, words formed, or the ghost of words. They were nothing like English, not speech, but I understood them the way you understand the color red. Come back, the hum said. Or perhaps, we came back. It was difficult to tell who they thought I was. I stumbled out of the water, up the slippery path, my breath clattering. The cabin felt too small once I closed the door behind me, a box I'd wandered into for a trick. My wet pants clung cold against my thighs. My field notebook lay on the table, open to a blank page. I stared at the paper until the page stopped being white and became possibility. My hand shook and made a poor first line. They're here. They're not fish. From the corner, the duffel slouched again. I looked up fast, heart knocking in my throat. The generator's pitch shifted, and with it the bulb's halo trembled. In the moment of dimness that followed, I saw movement along the ceiling. A procession of faint shapes like fish shadows cast by no fish, swimming along the wood knots as if the planks were water. I whispered my own name. It had the weight of a fishing weight. I whispered my mother's, my father's. The names made no difference. The shadows continued their slow parade, turning in perfect synchronization. I tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. Get a grip, Mara, I told myself. Write it down and it will become, what? Manageable? Small? But writing did not shrink it. The pen dug into the paper, and below my clumsy sentence, more words appeared not in my hand but in a dribbling pale ink that was not ink. Don't bring a net. Don't throw anything back. I stepped away so hard my chair screeched. The generator sputtered. The cabin's quiet snapped like a rope strained too long. Footsteps scuffed across the porch. I went still, listening. I knew with a certain animal certainty that if I opened the door, no one would stand there. And yet the footsteps were real. Bootfalls, slow, dragging. They stopped outside the window, a breath from the glass. The bulb flared, dimmed, flared again. When it steadied, a pale oval hung beyond the window. For a heartbeat, I thought it was a face. The fog's trick. Then the oval moved sideways with the weightless certainty of something built to drift. A fish face, too human around the eyes, or a human face too fish. It slid past the window like a scout and was gone. I shut off the light. Darkness arrived at once, complete. In the black, the cabin breathed. The sea hummed. I pressed my forehead against the cold pane and looked down. The cove had become a spinning galaxy. Thousands of fish, ghosts, moved in patterns that were not random, not even close. Each pattern resembled a human gesture, a hand waving, a mouth opening, a head turning. The choreography made my scalp crawl. And then in a delicate, horrifying sequence, the fish outlined a human figure standing in the surf, arms a little away from the body as if unsure what to do with them. Me. The figure lifted one arm to touch its face, and the fish mimicked the motion, scattering briefly and smoothing back into place with a whisper of light. I lifted my own arm, unable not to. The fish followed, obedient as a mirror. I stepped back from the window, and they stepped forward. The hum grew tighter, a wire pulled to singing. I thought of the note again. Don't bring a net. Don't throw anything back. A rule like that wasn't about protecting fish. It was about not interfering with a ritual, not giving something the chance to cling. The realization came cold and certain as tide water. Those weren't fish at all. Or not only fish. They were carries, containers, vessels for the drowned. How many shipwrecks lay off this coast? How many names had sunk in storms and never returned to shore? The oarfish, the lanternfish, the ghostfish. Maybe they'd formed a new ecology, a coalition of bone and memory. Maybe the dead had learned they needed bodies that could live where their names had been lost. And maybe, oh God, maybe something in me called to them because I was the most recent thing the sea had almost kept. The quaver in my left wrist started. A stupid mailboat accident 2 summers ago. A wave smacking the hull sideways like a slap, me tumbling across the deck, the world going water. I'd felt the sea's hand closing over my head like a cap. I'd breathed one time, and the water had been colder than anything should be. Then a man's arm had hooked my jacket and dragged me coughing back to air. The handprint remained in my dreams. The wrapper of the sea. Lightning stitched the horizon. The thunder's delay told me the storm sat many kilometers off, yet the generator hiccuped again, and died. The bulb went dark. The cabin became one more shape inside the great black shape of night. And yet I wasn't blind. The cove's glow reached me like a low lantern, and in it the procession shifted. Footsteps again on the porch, a knock, 3 quiet taps. No, I said, my mouth dry. No, thank you. The door opened. A draft moved through, bringing sea cold and that melon-sweet smell, stronger now, nearly putrid. Something came across the threshold without weight, a sternum of light moving with quiet dignity. The outlines of fish swam in the room, carving pathways through the air, leaving pale wakes. They didn't swim up to me, not yet. They moved to the table, oh so delicately, and pressed their glowing bodies along the notebook. The pages flipped themselves, one by one, until they reached the back. The fish arranged there, and their glow made words. A sentence careful as a child placing shells. We came back for what you dropped. The hum braided into something like a voice then, not inside my ears, but inside the cavities of my bones. Each vertebrae became a note. I tried to swallow and found my throat too tight. What did I drop? I whispered. They moved to the window, collectively, and the world beyond brightened. The outline in the surf reformed. This time, they did not copy me. The figure in the water reached up and touched its throat. Something flashed at its fingers. A pendant, small, oval, the sort of thing you find in a gift shop and give someone to carry. I recognized the shape from memory before I knew why. The emergency whistle from the mailboat, the one I'd clutched as I went under, the one that had snagged and torn away when the man hauled me back up. I'd dreamed about that pull for months, the feeling of being turned inside out by a little chain. I don't have it, I told them. I lost it. We know, the bones of my spine said. We kept it. They moved away from the window. The fish in the cabin organized themselves into a narrow, gleaming chain, and from the chain something swung, barely visible, an absence in the light. When it touched my sternum, the cold blew straight through me, like a door opened into my body. I took a breath I had not known I was holding for 2 years. The chain slipped over my head, with a movement like water finding a drain. The absence settled against my skin and became weight. I gasped, not from pain, but from the sudden knowledge that I wore 2 hungers now, my own and the sea's. The fish pressed closer, a brightening, and whispered through my bones again, "Breathe." I did. The night air was sharp with salt, and underneath it the melon stink had sweetened into a clean, almost floral note. The chain warmed against my chest, and something clicked into place in me, as if a gear had engaged. The fear didn't vanish, exactly, but it became something with structure. A machine I could stand inside without being ground to meal. The fish drifted back to the door and hovered. The hum shifted lower, a question that felt like a hand extended. The figure in the surf waited, arms loose at its sides. Okay, I heard myself. Okay! I followed them into the night. The fog wrapped my shoulders like a wet shawl. At the water's edge I paused, waiting for the sensible part of me to scream that I was insane. But the whistle's weight argued on behalf of the impossible. I stepped in. The sea didn't resist. It accepted, like a body, like a lover who forgives and forgets nothing. The fish circled my legs, my waist, my ribs. The water climbed me with delicate, cold hands. I put 2 fingers to the whistle and found nothing, and everything. It was not metal. It was a shape that could be many things. I lifted it and on impulse blew. No sound came, but the hum around me tightened into a vivid thread. The fish flared. For an instant, lights turned on in all the little corridors behind their not eyes, and I saw them. I saw mouths speaking final words the water stole, hands reaching for hands they could not reach, eyes looking up at a brightness they would never break through. I saw names, not all human, not all from ships. The ones the nets didn't throw back, turtles, seals, seabirds. Souls who had learned a more patient way to return. The ghost fish were not carriers only, they were an invitation. A path back to the shore of what we forget. They had come for their whistle, the promise we made to the drowned. We will hear you. In the proper stories, this is where I would falter or flee. The tide would pull me too suddenly, and I'd fight to return. But I didn't run. I stood with the water at my chest, my heart slamming calmly, and the fish rose around me until their light made a canopy. The figure in the surf moved closer, and then all at once it was not the fish shape anymore. It was a woman with hair like kelp and eyes full of low tide. She lifted her hand, and in it lay my whistle, or its spirit, thin, oval, weightless, and heavy. She pressed it to my mouth. Breathe, the bones of my spine said again. I inhaled. Sea entered as if it had always belonged, cold and right. It did not drown me. It filled the hollows and moved up behind my eyes, where it made slow, patient rooms. We hear you, I said, and it was not only my voice. The figure smiled without showing teeth. She backed away, step by slow step, until the water took her fully. The fish pivoted once, twice, like a bow, and streamed after her. The cove dimmed to ripples. The hum thinned to nothing. The fog lifted as if hauled by invisible pulleys. Far offshore, lightning stitched another seam, quieter now, almost decorative. I stood there until the cold began to bite. Then I walked back up the path, the whistle resting against my chest like a live thing. The cabin felt warmer than before, larger for having been full of more than me. I turned the generator back on, and its sound matched my pulse. At the table, my notebook lay open. On the last page, my clumsy sentence waited. Beneath it, the pale writing, theirs, glowed for a moment longer and then faded, as though it had been written on breath. I wrote in my own dark ink, hands steady now, they are not fish, they are the returned. They will come to me again, and I will listen. I slept, not deeply, but without dreams. Once I woke to a soft tapping on the glass, like fingernails. I went to the window and saw nothing but my reflection, and below it a faint, respectful birthing of light where the tide turned. In the morning I boiled real water and made real tea, and it tasted of exactly what it was. On the table the keys lay where I'd left them. The note's hook of a signature stared up, unsmiling. When I stepped outside, gulls argued over something transparent and ribboned that had washed up and should not have been on the shore. I shooed them away and nudged it back into the surf. It slipped out as if it knew the way. By the second night, the humming had a pattern. By the third, I understood parts of it well enough to hum back. I should have emailed Dee, should have written a paper, should have called a colleague and tried to explain. Instead, when dusk turned the water to hammered pewter, I made sure not to bring my net. I stood where the tide could sweep my ankles clean, and I waited for the procession. And when they came, my ghost fish, my returned, I breathed, and the sea breathed with me. Whether this ends resolved or not is a matter of your definition. I have what I dropped. They have what they came for. The door is open. The tide that would not go back goes back now, and then returns, as tides do, as we all do, carrying light we learned how to keep.